Hi, glad you could join me. In this video I want to show you the tool, the Greek Bible Student. It was written primarily to give a series of tools to support the New Testament, but in fact we've incorporated the Old Testament, the Septuagint version of the Old Testament, in with it. Now, I was going to give you a list of what's in it, but I think the best way to explain the various elements of this application is to actually show you. So in a moment we're going to launch the application and I'll walk you through some of those tools. Before we do that, you need to know where you can find the executables for this application, and you'll find them on GitHub, and the address is down below. I'm showing you the address for the Windows version. There is in fact a Mac version, and this is where you can find the Mac version. So the executables are there, and that's where they are, but if you hunt not very far in GitHub, you will actually find the source files as well. So if you want to have a play with it and see if you can make something better of it, or indeed if you want to contribute to the project, then feel free to let me know and start working. But I hope it's useful as it stands. It's based on public domain tools, so it's not cutting edge, and there are some limitations. It doesn't replace the need to get good books, a good source, text source, or a good lexicon, but I think it does help in terms of trying to do work quite quickly. But see what you think as we go through the video, and indeed, if you think it may help you, you can download and give it a go, see if it helps you. So without any more ado, let's have a look at the application, and I will tell you more as we go. So here we are, and I'm going to launch the application now. Now, I've actually selected a small portion of my screen because I tend to have quite a large screen, probably bigger than most people's screens. But I wanted to do it this way to show you, if you like, the starting point, to show you what it's like when it starts, and then in fact talk about resizing the actual application. So here's the window out of the application right from the start, and it's okay, but it's a little small for my liking, and if you've got a bigger screen you may want to resize. So I'm going to resize the application, probably a little bit on the big side, but that's good. And I'm actually going to give a little bit more space to the text. And what I wanted to emphasize was that once you actually do that once, it remembers that from session to session. So if I close this now, when I open it next time, it should actually give you the same size screen. So let's just check that it's doing that. Again, it goes through and loads everything, and there it is, the same size screen. Okay, now rather than having all this kerfuffle around it, I'm going to just change over to focus specifically on this screen and not show all the extra. Okay, so here we are, fully focused on the application. And I'm going to explain the different elements now that are in the application, and I think the best way to do that is really just to start using the application, show you how each of the bits work. But before I launch into that, let me emphasize that in a sense it's a story of two halves. The left side is basically about the text, although there are a few other bits and pieces, and the right hand side is, if you like, all the extra bits that I work around it. So let's talk first of all about using the text. As you can see, the text has two elements shown by these two tabs at the top, the New Testament and the Old Testament, the Septuagint. So although there's a certain degree of integration, there's also a certain degree of separation. So if you were looking at the Old Testament, all you do is click on the tab. Everything else looks pretty much the same. If I flip back again, notice book, chapter and verse. You can move one chapter at a time, and then down here you've got a few other things that are pretty much exactly the same when they go into the New Testament, apart from the fact that they're focused on the New Testament. I'm going to focus pretty much on the New Testament because I think most people that would want to use this would probably be more likely to be interested in the New Testament. But what I say about the New Testament applies to working the Septuagint too. If there are any differences, I'll comment on them at the time. So here we are, book, chapter and verse. And clearly if you want to change books, it's easy enough. We can look at Romans, so I'm going to have a look at Romans, and there we are. And by default, when I change to a new book, it goes to chapter 1 of that book. I'm interested in Romans chapter 8, so we'll go to chapter 8, and there we are on chapter 8. And if you can read your Greek quick enough, you can sort of see that it is what in Romans chapter 8. Let's imagine I've been doing some study, so I'm going to be looking at a few other things. Let's have a look at Philippians chapter 2, and we'll look at Hebrews chapter 1. Okay, so you imagine now I've done some work, I've looked at these various things. I want to get back to Romans 8. One of the things that it also has, in addition to the book and the chapter, is the history down here. And as you can see, it gives me a kind of inverted history of what I've been looking at. So those are exactly the things I've been looking at in the order that I've looked at, but reversed, as it were. So the top one is the most recent, the second one is the next recent, and so on. And if I want to go back to Romans 8, all I've got to do is go through the history, click, and there I am. You will notice also that there's a verse. If I change the verse, which I can do, it won't change anything visibly. What that does is tells me what is the currently active verse, and you can see over here, this is one example, that on the notes it's currently set at Romans 8:1. In fact, if I click anywhere, I'm going to click on verse 13. So if I click on verse 13, you'll notice that the verse in the verse list changes to 13, and so does the notes. So 13 is now the active verse. So there's a variety of ways of making that verse active. The easiest, in a sense, is clicking on it. So that's it. That's navigating around. And as we said, in fact, you can change chapters simply by clicking on these arrows in the obvious way. And it will step through the chapters of a particular book, limited to that book, so it won't go across book boundaries. Okay, so that's the text. The next thing I want to show you is the sort of menu that allows you access to the various activities, the various mini tools that are as part of the application. One of the ways of accessing most of the tools in the application is through a sort of mini menu that exists within the text page. So I'm going to focus for a little bit on this word, apothneskein. It's slipped up. There we go, apothneskein. I've clicked on it, and if I right click, I get this little menu. And the thing I want to focus on here initially are the copy options. So the top 4 or 5 options in this little menu. It's actually a context menu. So essentially I can copy that word, I can copy the whole verse that it occurs in, I can copy the whole chapter, or in fact if I make a selection I can copy the selected text, and I'll come back to that. So let's look at copy the word first. I clicked on the word, I right clicked on the word apothneskein. So I'm going to copy that word. Okay, and when I click on copy, rather than it doing a straight copy, it gives me a variety of options. So I can either copy to memory, to the clipboard, or to notes. Now I actually find that most of the time I'm doing the copy to memory, because I tend to use this part and parcel of writing documents, and if I'm writing the documents in English or in whatever language I happen to be using, I may want to include Greek words. So by copying there I can then paste them into my word processor. And of course you can paste it into pretty much any application you want. I'm going to choose notes this time simply so it's visible. And the idea is that if you're creating notes against a verse, then you may want to actually put in one or more of the words in the verse. You can include the reference in the copy or not include the reference in the copy. I'll leave the reference in. You can include the accents or not. I'm not quite sure of the benefit of removing the accents really, but it's there and it's available. So I can set these options. Now if every time I copy a word I have to go through this palaver and sort of change whatever I want to change, it could be quite frustrating. So the other element on the dialogue is that it can remember the settings. So if I do that and I select the remember the settings, then the next time I copy a word in the New Testament, it will remember my settings and it won't present me with this menu again. So let's do that, and there we have it. It's got the reference as well, apothneskein. Okay, and it's in the note. Let's just show about copying the word again. So I'm going to copy the word pneumati. So I'm going to copy the current word, and you'll notice it's copied it straight in. No mucking around, no presenting the additional menu. If I want to copy the whole verse, I right click anywhere in the verse, and then I copy the current verse. Now because it's a different copy option, it presents me with all the options again. So I wanted to go to notes. This time I won't include the reference, but I want to remember it again. So okay, there it is, no reference, but the verse is now copied in. Okay, I'm not going to copy the whole chapter, but the same thing would happen. And imagine I want to copy a sort of sequence of stuff for some reason. I can copy across verse boundaries, that's not a problem, although it will include the verse number then. But I want to copy that sequence of words, that selected text, so I now do the selected text. Again I'm presented with the menu the first time because it's a new copy option. So notes, won't include the reference, remember it, and in it goes. There we are. Now if you've got your thinking hat on, you'll be asking, well that's okay, but what if I've copied a few words, I wanted to copy them the same way, and then suddenly I want to copy, let's say I want to copy a word without the reference. Okay, so I'm going to copy this last word without a reference. Okay, so I right click again, but this time before I do any copying I can reset the copy options, and if I reset the copy options I get a different menu which actually shows me what copy options I have actually set the options for. Now I want to change my settings for the word, so I'll just deselect the single word. I'll leave the others as they are. So OK for that. I'll go to a new line. I'll click on this final word, SS there, and I'll copy that word. And because I've deselected it, it prompts me for the options again. So once again it goes to notes. This time I don't want to include the reference. I'm not going to bother remembering it either. So there we go, and it simply puts the word in no reference at the top. And just to prove that it limits itself to whatever I chose, I'll do the verse again. Okay, and where are we here? and it copies the verse straight in, doesn't ask. That would apply to any verse. I stayed on verse 13 so you can see it all in notes. If I actually clicked to a different verse, the notes disappear. So that wouldn't have helped. So I wanted you to see the notes. So there we go. So that's the copy options, including the ability to reset the copy option. Before I show you the next option on the menus, perhaps there's a couple of things I really ought to have said about the text itself and about what we're doing. So far, what we've looked at would be fairly easy to do from tools that are available on the internet itself. The text can exist, you can quite easily copy and paste. So why are we doing it? And the answer is, one of the parts of the answer is that it sits on your own PC. That can be a disadvantage if you're using multiple PCs. Using internet tools means that you can use them from any one of those PCs. But if you're on the move, for example, then sometimes it can be difficult to keep the connection to the internet, whereas this would be on your PC. It's wholly based on your PC. Similarly, if you've got a fairly slow connection to the internet, you're not limited by the speed of the internet. It's all being downloaded onto your PC. So that's true for the text on the simple basis of what we've done. Some of the tools, I think, add some value. Some elements of what it presents is simply collecting those tools and putting them all in one place. So let's have a look at before I do, the other thing I wanted to mention was that it is public domain. Everything on here is public domain, and that actually means that they have some limitation. As far as I can work out, the text is basically a slightly more modernised form of Westcott and Hort. So it's not the most bang up to date text academically. So it doesn't replace your need to get a good text. You still need to get a good text. You still need to check that the text in the current, if you like, the best academic, the best research text is consistent with what you're looking at on here. By and large, it will be the same, but there may be some slight differences. This is going to be true of some of the other tools we look at, and I'll comment on those as we meet them. So let's go back. We're on verse 13, and if I right-click once again, let me go back to apothneskein. We've had the copy options. We then get the search thing. I'm going to leave that for now because searching is a little bit more complex, so I don't want to get into that quite yet. So we'll look at this analyze word. And analyze word gives you the ability to parse the word that you've clicked on, you've right-clicked on. So there's apothneskein. It tells you what the root is, and it tells you what the parse is. This is based on some work. In the help file, I actually give details of where it's come from. Again, you need to check that it's correct. So don't suspend your thinking, your intellect as you lead this, and just accept what's there, because it's always a possibility that the source information that I base this on is wrong. And I'd hate to think that you lose your PhD thesis or whatever simply because you've uncritically accepted whatever we've presented. But on the whole, so far, everything I've found, I think, is correct. But keep your thinking hat on. So there's the parsing. I've called it grammatical summary because it's much better than saying parsing. Sounds posher. And lexical information is simply the meaning. I've taken the lexical information from Liddell and Scott's intermediate lexicon because it's in the public domain. By and large, it has a better academic profile than Strong's Concordance, which is a bit of a shame because Strong's Concordance is actually better represented on the internet. and it would have been much easier simply to link it up to Strong's. But I wanted to try and position it so it's using the most credible academic information that I could access. That does mean that I've had to jump through a few hoops to make sure that it links up to that information. It's just possible that from time to time it will get it wrong. So once again, you have to think carefully and closely. It's also true that Liddell and Scott is a little bit old now. There are some newer lexicons that reflect current academic work, and again, this doesn't replace the need for you to get a decent lexicon, but it does make the information easily accessible. So there's the parsing and the lexicon facility. Fairly simple, fairly straightforward, no problem. So now we need to start thinking about the search capability. As we've seen, there is an option within the let's go to verse 13. There is an option within the menus to search. Now, actually, there's several ways of initiating and performing the search. The way I'm going to show you first is the way I find that I normally do it, and I think it's probably the easiest. So let's look again at this word apothnerskein, and I'm going to ask the question of where does it occur? Show me all the references within both the Old and New Testament that have the word apothnerskein. So what I do is I've right-clicked on the word, I copy the current word to search. So it is a kind of copy, it's continuing the copy theme. And it's taken me to this tab up here, which I could have gone back to manually, but it's taken me to this tab here. It actually has already set up search results ready for me, but that's something else. And here's the word, this is the word I'm going to search for. Okay, now you can see this is quite busy, there's quite a lot of other options, and we're going to have to talk about these. And some of them a little bit awkward to get your head around, so let's take it one step at a time. So let's do the search. I'm going to click on perform the search, and you'll notice that it will give me some information as to what it's doing as in fact it goes through. So that was fairly quick. It doesn't seem to have found anything in the Old Testament, so I've chosen a word that isn't used in the Old Testament, which is a little bit surprising, but there you go. That's simple enough. But what about all this extra information? Let's choose another word. Let's stay with it, something that I think will be in the Old Testament. So I'm going to select pneumati. This will take a lot longer. Okay, so let's perform that search. So there we go, and you can see it's the Old Testament, and you can see it's working away. Now notice while it's doing it, there's this extra button that's appeared. And this is because this is a long search, and if you suddenly get stuck in the search, you might think, oh, well, I'm not interested in all this, I'll look at something related. And you can stop the search. Click on that button, it will stop the search instantly. The search is finished, so the button's gone. So here we've got something that occurs in the Old Testament, variety of books in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, which is not surprising. You'd have been shocked if it wasn't. Let's suppose I only want to look for that word in the New Testament. So I don't want to get rid of all these books. Now this is the list of books that it will look at. So I can actually get rid of some of these books simply by clicking here. Notice that it's on the option use. So at the moment it's saying show me all the books that I'm going to use. So I click on Genesis, Pentateuch. It's got rid of all the books, the first 5 books. And in fact I can click on all the Old Testament stuff. So I've only got the New Testament stuff. Okay. And if I perform the search now, it will limit it to those books that are showing. Easy enough. If I actually wanted to be even more limited, suppose in fact I only want to see what Paul says about it, and maybe I'm not convinced that these 3 books are from Paul, so I'll remove them. I don't want to get too hung up about that, so ignore that if it troubles you. But there may be a variety of reasons why you want to exclude certain books. You may even want to just get rid of all of them except one. But you'll notice that I've removed books. Let me remove another one just so that you can see me doing it again, or another couple. Okay, clicking on multiple books selects them. Click a second time on something and it removes it. Okay, so if I remove that book, Ephesians has gone as well. And now if I'm not sure if Ephesians or 1 Timothy is in the list anyway yet. So there's Ephesians. So let's do the search again, and it should miss Ephesians, and in fact the pastoral letters as well. So there's Galatians, and it goes straight on to Philippians. Okay. If I finish that and I want to do a full search again, I can reinstate the books and it will put everything back to where it was when it started. If I go over to the omit, by default it omits everything that's selected. So actually an easier way of putting the New Testament in would have simply been to do it that way. And I've got exactly the same result as before, so now it will include the books of the Old Testament, of the New Testament, and only the books of the New Testament. Okay. By default, it looks at the root of the words. So in fact, when the word that I selected, verse 13, was pneumati, and in fact some of these words are pneumati, but it's also picked up other forms, pneumatos, pneuma. If I actually want an exact match, then I want to look for the word exactly as I found it. Since we were looking at the New Testament, I will get rid of the Old Testament, and I'll perform the search, and now it will only look for pneumati. Okay. So there are various ways in which I can constrain the search. We'll put everything back the way it was. There's a little bit more to the search as well, and you may have noticed this when we actually did the search in the first place. There's the pneumati. I'm going to see if there's a contrast with somatos. I want to see, I'd really like to know how many, where in the Bible, Old and New Testament, pneumati is used in relation to soma. Pneuma is used in relation to soma. So I'm going to put soma in as my secondary search. Okay, I've chosen somatos, but I've put it back to words with the same root. So any version or form of soma, any form of pneuma will be looked at. I can set the gap between the words. If I reduce it, then they've got to be very closely, they've got to occur pretty much next to each other. If I create a bigger space, I've got more flexibility. It's a call that you've got to make as to how far apart you can make them. You still have to look at the results that it returns and see whether it's significant or not. But we'll now perform that search. And because we're looking at these two words in proximity, this is what can take some time. So let's start the search. Well, actually, it was quite quick. Okay. So we have found some in the Old Testament. We have found some in the New Testament. This is a little bit more complex as well, because sometimes the search has crossed word boundaries, verse boundaries, and when the two verses are together, then that's telling me that it's crossed the verse boundary. So there's a link between Romans 8:13 and Romans 8:14. The two are used close together. That may be significant. It may not be. Now, if I right-click on any part of these, I get a similar kind of menu to the one that I used on the text. So I can copy the results. This time it tells me, so it doesn't give me that little dialogue where I have to set it and keep resetting it. This time I actually choose whether it goes to memory or notes, and the same with the single result. So both of those work pretty much the way the other copies did. So it can copy the specific result. But I can also, if I got these results and I think I'd like to look at that in a little bit more detail, look at the context, I can change the text on the left-hand side to the chapter that this result reflects. So Ephesians 4:4, so if I click on this, it will take me to Ephesians 4. So there we go. So I'm now in Ephesians 4, and it's actually set verse 4 as the active verse. So I'm currently looking at the verse that was the result in the search. Okay, let's go back to Romans 8. And that's basically the search facility. But I haven't said everything I can say about the search facility, simply because you may want to look for a word and you're not quite sure which verse it's in. So you may want to enter the word in this search for the word directly thing directly. Let's go back to a basic search. Notice this button that allows me to go back to simply the simple search. And in fact, if I want to do it myself rather than right-clicking from the text, I actually have a Greek keyboard here which I can use. So I can enter my word and let's choose a different word. I'm going to choose echein. Okay, so I want to put in E, and it puts it in this little thing here. Need the smooth breathing. So there's my word. And I'm going to put that in the primary search word, so I'm going to click on primary search word. So that actually tells me where it's going to go. And then when I click on use word, it will put it in the search for the word. There we have it. So I'm now going to do a search for echein. So let's perform that search. And away it goes, looking for it through both the Old and the New Testament. Unsurprisingly, it's a common word, so it's going to take quite a while to search for that. Now I need to explain that what it actually does is it looks for the specific word, and it will start scanning through from the beginning of the Old Testament. It will start scanning through from that word to find the root of that word, in fact echo. So if you happen to choose a perfectly valid version of that word that is not used in either the Septuagint or the New Testament, I'm afraid it won't find it. So so if in fact you put a search in for a word and it gives you nothing, then try a different form of that word. But also check that you spelt it correctly. All the other options work exactly the same way, and you can, as you can see, you can actually put a secondary word search in and do that as well. On the whole, though, I find that simply right-clicking on the word I'm interested in does the business. So that's searching and using the search. So we've done the search and we don't need this virtual keyboard anymore, so I'm going to hide the keyboard, maximize the amount of text that's available to me. And it's worth saying that this search option that we've looked at is really a kind of concordance, and I'm fairly pleased with the idea of being able to search for two words in close proximity. Another thing that you might want to do, either as if you teach Greek, you may want to do it for your students, or if you are learning Greek, you may simply want to do it for your own benefit, is to create vocab lists. Now, I'm going to check again Romans 8:13. Want to make sure that's the active verse. So let's have a look at the Set Up Vocabulary tab down this bottom area. Looks a little bit daunting once again, but actually it's fairly straightforward. So I'm going to do a vocab list for the current verse, I'm going to do them by type and alphabetically. Now the type is in this list here, and then alphabetically speaks for itself. So we'll do nouns and verbs. So I want a list of all the nouns and all the verbs by in order. So nouns first, then verbs, and alphabetically within those groupings. I'm going to show the roots and the words as used in verse 13. It uses the default verse, so just as we've noted that the default verse in notes, so this uses the default verse, and I'm going to create a vocab list, and there we have it. So if I look at verse 13, it sorted them by nouns, so all the nouns begin with either a pi or a sigma, and then the verbs. If I want them actually in the order of use, but nouns first and then verbs, then I can simply change the option, display that, and that will show them in the order they're used. Then I can check that in verse 13. Nouns first, there's sarx, then there's pneuma, then there's praxis, and then there's soma. And then the same is true of the verbs. And this one I think is quite useful because you can see it as used, but also you get the roots as well. But you can show just the roots, or you can show them just as used. You can mix them completely. So if I mix them and in order of use, I get the nouns and the verbs all mixed up. They're just in sequence. And obviously I can choose as many as I want. If none of them are selected, then it actually selects them all. Let's do it that way. Okay. I can do it for the whole chapter, but that gives you quite a huge list, and visually it's a bit of a nightmare. Simple enough. And again, I have options as before. Basically, simple copies. I can either copy the thing as text, so I'll do that. I'll copy it to notes. I need to go and have a look at that and see what's happened. Or in fact, I can copy it as a tab delimited. That'll be most useful in memory. I could eventually put that into a notepad file or something like that and save it, and it would give me a list that I could import into Excel or whatever. Okay, let's go and look at the notes. Oh, it's stuck it right at the beginning. I've obviously changed the position of my cursor, so there are the notes. Doesn't look terribly good really in notes, but there you go. Let's in fact get rid of that. Not very pleased with that. Okay, so that's search result. That's a vocab list. So now you've seen basically all the tools. But obviously you don't get away that easily. There are a few other things I need to show you. First of all, finishing off what's visible on the in the main application, you've got this little one here that we haven't really talked about. Let's go back to the search results. So here's my search results. Notice they've stayed there. They don't get wiped until you do a different search, a new search. Now I might want to look at that in more detail, so I can resize the pane fairly easily, simply by choosing one of these options. I want to see what's in the top panel, so I'll maximize the top panel, and hey presto, it gives me a bit more visibility of what's going on in the search panel. I'm more likely to use that than the option to maximize the bottom panel, because the bottom panel pretty much is it. The only reason I might want to maximize the bottom panel is if I'm doing quite a lot of work on the notes and I'm filling the page. I obviously may want to put it back to pretty much where it was, so I can equalize them so they're more or less half and half. So that's the basic application. You've seen pretty much everything, and obviously I can close the application by clicking on the close button or in the normal way. We've got some menu options, and I want to look in particular, first of all, at preferences. Most applications, I guess, have some kind of preference capability, and this is no exception. So if I click on preferences, I get a fairly busy dialog. And it shows you each of the areas that we've talked about. So New Testament, Old Testament, Septuagint, and it gives you an example in each one. Some of them are not very realistic, but you'll see why we've got an example in a minute. So Septuagint, I've done the Psalm 23, the parsing, the lexicon, the search results, the vocab lists, and notes. Okay. In each case, you've got a number of sub-tabs, and these are the things that you can change. So in the text for both the New Testament and the Septuagint, you can change the verse numbers, and you can change the Greek text. In every case, in the first option, whichever it is, you've also got the option to change the background color. Now, one of the questions may be, why would you want to change colors? There's plenty of evidence now that indicates that some disabilities are color sensitive. For example, with dyslexia, sometimes a person can have struggled to be able to distinguish characters, but certain combinations of colours make it easier. So if that were your problem, then in fact you could actually set the colours up the way you want them. Apparently the same is true, can be true with Asperger's as well. But there are plenty of other reasons as well. If you're using the thing quite a lot, you may want to distinguish the different areas. Because you're changing from one thing to another, it's very easy to lose track of where you are, so you may want to actually set each thing up with a distinctive background colour, for example. So let me show this in operation. Let me choose a background colour of red. So there is. Now, this hasn't changed anything yet. It won't change anything until I OK the whole thing. To make it a bit easier to read, I'm going to change the text to yellow. I'm going to change the Greek text to yellow as well. Okay? And I'll make the Greek text a little bit bigger because I'm actually finding it difficult to see when it's that small. Okay, so now that will be specific to the New Testament. The Septuagint hasn't changed. And if I'm only using the New Testament, that's not such a problem. With search results, I've actually got more options, because not only can I change the text in the main text, but the primary word, which by default is red, and the secondary word, which by default is blue. And again, if you have problems with those particular colours, you may want to change them. You can also, rather than having them set, is to change them back. Let's say we change them back to black. Okay, so I can't distinguish it now, but we'll change the primary word to italics. So there it is. I don't find that so easy to see, but I guess if you have a problem with colours in general, maybe that would be a better way to do it. I'm going to change that back, but we'll make it a slightly less demanding colour. There. Okay. Bit bizarre. Whether that's really desirable or not, I don't know. Not to be done lightly, but can be done. So let's OK that. Notice we've changed the settings for the search and for the New Testament. So OK that. The New Testament changes immediately, as does the Septuagint. The search doesn't. In fact, this stuff up here generally doesn't. So it's only when you perform the church search that you find that it takes the information that I've put in. There are no secondaries here because I'm doing a simple search, so I'm only getting the primary change. So those are the options. Now that I've actually okayed them and they are in the main application, when I close the application, it will remember those colours. So next time you open, and in fact the text and the text size and all that, so next time you open the application, you will find the same settings that you've chosen. So those are the options. Now I haven't really talked much about notes, and we're going to look at notes now. We have actually created a note with all the stuff we did in showing copy and in fact in the search as well. The idea of these notes, you can create a note for each verse, and each verse is shown separately. So if I change, this is verse 13, so if I was working through it, I'm on verse 14, and I might make another note. Let's copy the current word to notes. We will include a reference, and hey presto. So we've now got something in verse 14. So I go back to 13, I've got the information for 13. If I go for 14, I've made the notes on 14. Obviously you can type stuff in. I'm just doing stuff that's easy to present, but you might well want to make some comments. You might do a devotional study, you might do an academic study, and notes on here. Okay. But we have options up here for managing notes, and the first thing we can do is create a new note set. Now what I've done is I've said that all the notes that I'm using in this current setup form a set, and I can create different sets. So if I were doing different articles, for example, I might do a note set for each article. So I'm going to create a new note set, and I'm going to call this for presentation purposes. Okay, and you'll notice now that it tells me that my notes are for presentation purposes, and although verse 13 is the active verse, there is no note, and in fact if I go to 14 there is no note. So I'm going to create a note in verse 10, and I'm going to say this is a note for verse 10. So I go back to 13, that note disappears. Go back to 10 and it's there. Okay. I'm going to create another note set as well. So create a new note set, and I'll call this dummy example. I'm deliberately putting spaces in so you can see that you can do that as well. Now notice that it automatically makes the thing that I've just created the current note. I don't really want to use dummy example, I've just created it as an example. So I'm going to move it back, so I'm going to check the next option, which is choose a different note set. And it gives me the option of changing it to either default or for presentation purposes. I'm in dummy example, so that's obviously not in my list. So I'll go back to for presentation purposes and check that my note in verse 10 is still there. It is. Okay. But I can change back to choose a different note set. Let's go to default, and verse 13 is there. Okay, but let's go back to the presentation one for presentation purposes. Okay. The third option on the list was in fact simply to delete an existing note set. And you'll notice that I can either delete default or dummy example. I can't delete the note set that I'm currently in, and I want to delete the dummy example. So okay, that's gone. Simple as that. There is in fact an option to show you what the current one is, but that's really not very helpful because it's already here anyway, and in fact looks even better. So I am going to change back to default, and I am going to remove that presentation one as well, because I really don't want that hanging around on my system. So I've only got the one note set now, and it's actually removed it from the hard disk. So that is notes in a nutshell. That's notes. We've got one other option that we'll look at, which is the relocation of files. Now, I have to confess that I'm a little cagey about relocation of files. There's a whole load of files that support the application, mainly the text, but some images and things like that. And by default, these are placed in a file, a directory underneath your user normally on the C drive, the drive that is the base drive for Windows. And I would suggest that if possible, leave it there. Now you can see where mine is. I shouldn't even be showing you my username, so I've kind of rubbed that out a bit. But you may want to move them for several reasons. One is that you may want to move them to a location where other people can use them, so that you can share them with other people. You may also want to use them somewhere that's a bit more accessible, so that you can actually get to your notes details and save them. And in fact, you may be running out of space on your C drive, and it's a way of releasing a little bit of space. So basically, you can move these. And if you want to move them, and it's been developed so you can move them across different disks, you simply choose the place where you want to put it. I would want to put it on my F drive probably. I think I had it under test. There you are, Greek. I've already done this in the past, so you can see that it's created the structure there. I would OK that. It now tells me where it's going to go, and then I will click on move. I don't want to move mine, so I'm not going to do it. But if you click on move, it's quite quick, and it will move everything across. So that's relocating files. I guess what needs to be said is it would be good if you did a basic backup before you did that, just in case you hit any problems. Okay. Very quickly, I'm going to show you that you've got this other options, but under edit, basically copy, copy, and the setting up the search capabilities. Oh, this is copying the search as well, and the vocab lists. This is exactly what I've already shown you, only I'm showing you the fact that you can do it from the edit menu as well as from the actual context in which it occurs. Okay, there are a couple of other things that I need to show you now, and then we're done. Okay, you have in fact a help option here. And it's really in the form of a kind of tutorial, so it goes through the system in pretty much the way I've gone through it, showing you information, explaining it. So you may, if you're happy reading, you may actually find that this is more helpful even than the video. There isn't a kind of context sensitive help, but I'm hoping that the fact that you've got this hypertext, blast from the past there, this hypertext capability, so I can click on secondary search criteria, for example, and it takes me there. So I'm hoping that that will help you work it out. A few things that need to be said. Right at the end, I make some caveats, which fundamentally is you still need to do the work, exactly what I've been saying. Don't rely on this totally. You need some decent tools, and I mentioned some as well. It also acknowledges where the source of some of the information that I've been working from, which I think is important. Give people the credit for what they've done. And in fact, it creates, it tells you contact details. If you have any problems or if you have any suggestions, feel free to contact me. I can't promise that my reaction time will be brilliant, but obviously, and if it's a particular problem and causing you real grief, I will try and do something quickly. But you can contact me anyway. Okay. The other thing that needs to be said from here is you've also got this about Greek Bible Student, and that really gives you some basic information. The important thing about this is the version number. So if you do need to contact me specifically with a problem but with suggestions, do make sure that you tell me the version number that you're working on. At the moment, this is based on version 1.1, but obviously it will evolve as time goes on, but the video may not. So make sure that you check what the version number is. If you have a problem in particular, give me as much information as you can and think is necessary. If it's a particularly problematic technical problem, you may need to give me information about your computer as well, so that I can actually see whether it's something that's being created by some kind of conflict. Not likely, but it's always possible. So I hope you find this application useful. I hope you find it helpful, and I hope you find it productive. Thank you for sticking with me to the end.